I rise today to speak on the Statewide Treaty Bill 2025. Our role in opposition is not to rubber stamp feel-good ideas. It's to scrutinise, to ask the hard questions and to make sure what we pass actually works for the people it affects and the people we represent. Many say just vote for treaty because it feels right. But when I question their rationale, I worry that they haven't read the bill. They don't seem to understand what it actually does, nor see the harm that will be caused. I've seen firsthand the incredible work done in Aboriginal communities. I spent 15 years working in an Aboriginal community-controlled health organisation, dating back to 1997. So I saw the power of self-determination, local people training their own health workers, elders leading programs, and communities taking charge of their own futures. I saw it work. I saw it make a difference, and this all happened without treaty. So some argue that past governments have failed to address Indigenous issues such as violence, discrimination and neglect only because their efforts were not informed by, led by or owned by Aboriginal peoples. They go further to claim that only a treaty can empower First Peoples to make decisions about matters that affect them. This is untrue. This narrative overlooks the wins that we have already achieved. There are successful programs today that are indeed informed by, led by, owned by Aboriginal communities and achieved without treaty. My friend Michael Bell, who sits in the chamber today, known to many as Mukai, and who serves on the Treaty Commission. He and I recently caught up and reflected on the progress we made during our time working in Aboriginal health services. We were guided by Aboriginal boards. We worked in a way that was shaped by the wisdom of the local elders and the cultural protocols that we abide by. Not every health initiative was embraced. For example, the proposal for a needle exchange program was declined by elders, and although I personally supported it and explained its health benefits, the decision ultimately rested with the community. It reflected their values, their culture and their right to choose, and I respected that. And the way they did it worked. And there are many other successes. Locally, our otitis media or ear infection rates were down, our immunisation rates were exceptional, our asthma and diabetes management was effective, and so much more. Elders are living longer and healthier lives. In the area where I worked in Framlingham and other areas in South West Coast that I can point to, we're dealing with aged care issues like dementia now, issues that come from longer lifespans. And that is a real obvious sign of success. You can't deny that. Places like Haywood, Framlingham, Warrnambool and Portland, I've seen the results of community-led health models, and I've seen the trust built between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. That's the kind of progress we should be proud of and duplicate to close the gap. But ironically, this legislation puts that progress at risk. It will divide us. It is already creating resentment. I'm seeing this, I'm hearing this, and I'm disgusted by it, but it is what is happening. If we start giving one group of Australians different voting rights to another, we're not building unity, we're sowing division. How do we explain to the people of Victoria that some people can vote at 16 while others can't? That voting in Indigenous elections may be optional, while all Victorians are required to show up on election day for state, federal, local and local elections. These aren't minor details. They go to the heart of our democracy, fairness and equality under the law. Our democracy is not perfect, but it's one of the best democracies on earth. When I was at school, I wasn't taught the truth about our history, and that was wrong. I've been told stories that are heartbreaking and stories of real suffering. I remember my Indigenous friend, the late Lionel Harradine, who I have permission from his family to mention his name here in Parliament. He told me about his mother, who worked at a local doctor's in New South Wales. When authorities came to take the children, the doctor would quietly warn the family. It's a horrible story. The children would hide under the willow trees by the river. But one day, the authorities came too close. The children tried to swim across the river. Lionel's sister suffered an asthma attack and she was caught. She was taken. The family was shattered and the brothers and sisters and Lionel became part of the stolen generation. I know the stories of Conda. Poisons mixed into the flour to deliberately kill the children. Children died in agony. These are not stories to be dismissed. They are truths and they must be told. But how we tell the stories matter. We must teach the truth without laying guilt on people today who had no part in those wrongs. We must build understanding, not bitterness. We don't need a law to teach history. The government already controls the curriculum. We don't legislate multiplication tables or grammar, so why legislate history? If there's a will, and I really believe there is, it can be done without embedding division into the law. My electorate in South West Coast is the land of the Gunditjmara and Eastern Maar people. The Gunditjmara and Eastern Maar people are famous for their extensive landscape engineering prowess, shown in constructing kilometres of eel aquaculture channels, holding ponds and fish traps and in and around Budgebim, an amazing place to visit, by the way. There was a powerful article in the paper on the weekend and it captured the growing dissent within the Aboriginal community, who gave dire warnings. We have successes like I've described and we don't need another layer of bureaucracy. The money, the energy, the passion and the compassion should go there. If we really want to close the gap, we should be looking at the successful models, not creating another layer of bureaucracy and potential for corruption. That sentiment resonates deeply with what I've heard in my consultations with local community members, especially those who lived through the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission ATSIC era days of the 90s. Many of the local Aboriginal community have spoken candidly about their disillusionment with past consultation bodies, recalling how some got a voice but most didn't, ultimately becoming a source of division and pain. People tell me again and again that this moment feels like a reiteration of that time. The government attempts to establish parliamentary representation, but without general community trust, it falters. We must learn from these histories, not repeat them, the Aboriginal local people tell me. That's why I'm concerned to see a legislation used to stir emotion, score political points and create division. If anyone tries to suggest that my opposition to this legislation is somehow against the Indigenous community, I can assure you nothing could be further from the truth. I've spent years working alongside Aboriginal communities. My history of support is long-standing and deeply rooted. In fact, I may be the longest-serving non-Indigenous person at Framlingham without marriage or family connections. I say that not for recognition, but to underscore the depth of my commitment. To those who claim otherwise, they are simply wrong. The reason I stand opposed today is because of my support for the Aboriginal community, because I've seen firsthand the decades of hard work, resilience, the leadership that Aboriginal people have invested in closing the divide between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. This legislation, despite its intentions, threatens to undo that progress. And this legislation, rather than healing, will divide us. It's not the Aboriginal community that is causing this division. It is the Labor Party through their legislation and this drawing lines between us. It creates different rules for different members of our community. That is not unity. That is not equality. That is not what, as Australians, we strive for. We must be vigilant. We must be honest. We cannot undermine them with policies that fracture and confuse. I oppose this legislation because I believe in a better way forward, one that honours the past, listens to the present and builds a future of true equality. And that is at the heart of our approach, as articulated earlier in the debate by the Leader of the Nationals. Our job in this parliament is not to legislate based on emotion, it is to legislate based on outcomes. This isn't about the vibe. It is not about recognition. We all support that. And let's be honest, if there's someone in this place who doesn't want a better outcome for Indigenous communities, I'd like to know who they are. I'd like to hold them to account. Let me finish by saying this. I have a deep respect for Aboriginal communities. I've worked alongside them. I've seen the good that's been done. But I cannot support legislation that risks undoing that work, that divides rather than unites and replaces reconciliation with resentment, and that will not close the gap.